Channel 16, Tuckahoe's public access channel. Today I have a very interesting guest. His name is Jack McCarthy. I'm sure many of you who have watched the St. Patrick's Day parades over the years are familiar with Jack. Jack is a resident of our town, and he has many friends in the village of Tuckahoe, and we're happy to welcome you to Channel 16.
Delighted to be here.
Jack, tell us a little bit about your early life. I know you were born and raised on the
East side.
Mm-hmm.
Our block, you know, true. Everything centered around your block then. My parents were immigrants.
What block was that, Jack?
52nd Street, between 1st and 2nd Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived on the top floor.
Mm-hmm.
The rent was $22 a month.
Those were the days when the 2nd Avenue L used to go down.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my father worked on the docks.
Mm-hmm.
He lost his life in an operation. But we, you know, there was one thing. I read these stories about people in the paper, and they had such a miserable time, and they were abused. We were never abused. I mean this.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived up on the top of the roof in the summertime. We called it Tar Beach. And there we would fly our kites, and take a chance every once in a while and leave them there overnight. And that was a big deal, you know. And then if we wanted to cool off, we had the purling waters of the East River. And that's how you, oh yes, our gang was known as the, where we would go swimming as the Slavs Bathing Pavilion. Well, that's the way it was.
Now, I guess this was in the late 20s, early 30s?
That's about it, yeah. Exactly. And Dad was dead by this time.
Mm-hmm.
And
so your mother had to raise a family, huh?
she did. A saintly woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she, you know, we had to toe the mark. It came time to go to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And you know why I went to Commerce High School? I didn't go to Commerce High School to learn typing and the like.
Uh-huh.
I went to Commerce High School because Lou Gehrig went there.
You were quite a sports fan, weren't you?
Well, yeah, and I aspired to a career as a ball player or as a singer.
What position did you play?
As a catcher.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that handsome?
And what made you give up the idea of being a baseball player?
Well, I was injured in a ball game, and the captain of the football team was a good friend of mine, and he came down to visit, and he said, you know, the NBC is looking for personnel, and Helen works in the personnel office. That's his sister. Why don't you go and see her? And I'll tell you something else. He said, they have an Industrial League baseball schedule. I said, wow.
Now, this was in the early 1930s?
That's right. So I went over to see Helen, and she explained to be moving into Radio City. And that's the reason why I went there, because of the industrial baseball team.
What kind of money were you earning in those days?
$65 a month.
Payable twice a month? Or
Yeah, it was the first and, you know, the
15th.
first on the 15th,
Yeah.
sure.
The $32.50, huh?
Yep, and somehow you made do. And so I was out on the baseball team, and I won an announcer's audition. And to this day, I was the youngest announcer ever appointed to the NBC announcing staff. I was just a kid, 18. So I won the audition, and I would sign the station on and do little things as the network opened up. But the Daily News was promoting the Golden Gloves, and NBC was carrying it. And naturally, I'd be there. Oh, yes. While I was in high school, did you ever cut classes when you were in high school?
I refused to answer on the grounds that might incriminate me. Yes, we did.
Sure. I know I did. But I didn't go to the movies. I went to Stillman's gym to watch the fighters. I was, you know, this to me was the greatest thing in the world. And I knew that I'd see the great fighters of the time. So, anyway, the bouts were staged in 2 parts with a 15-minute intermission. And at halftime or during the intermission, I made myself known to Abe Schechter. He was the vice president of sports, news, and special events at NBC at the time, down in the ring. He said, you know anything about fights? I said, yeah. I said, I had about 15. I mean, he didn't know I was talking about street fights. You grew up on the east side with that. So he said, would you like to do a fight? Now, they had the two older men doing it, color, and I went on, and they never took me off for the rest of the night.
You must have done very
And
well.
the next day, a memo came down from the vice president in charge of programs. Juan Dejada Almonte, he said, a star was born last night, and
great.
he should be given every opportunity to follow sports.
And what sort of an increase in salary did you get for that?
That came, oh yeah, that was a big, big jump. What I was making per week, I was then making, what I was making
A month.
a month, I was now making per week $65
You
a
were in a
month.
big time then.
You bet, man. But I was also a low man on the totem pole, but not for long.
And now you also did some of the races. And how did that come about?
Well, they gave me the opportunity because of the fights. And I would sign. The reigning commentator at that time was Clem McCarthy. Racing fans, maybe you remember him. And
Sure.
I was assigned to introduce him, open the show at whatever track, and take it off at the end.
And how many times were you asked whether you were related to him?
Countless times. And now, when I started to do this, Clem would be about the age I am now, maybe a little bit younger, but not too much younger. And I looked at him and I said, wait a minute, this guy's not going to be around forever. So I just buried myself at the racetrack, the backstretch, grooms, the trainers, the owners. And then in my free time, I would go up on top of the grandstand, and with a program and a pair of glasses, I would call the races to myself. And that went on for a whole year. Now, the next year, Clem McCarthy took a contract out in Arlington Park because his wife was not well, and he needed the money, evidently. So he called me down. He said, have you been doing any? I said, been calling races to myself. He says, all right. He said, this is an audition. We'll be doing the Jamaica Handicap next Saturday. I said, boy, I'm telling you. So the next Saturday rolled around, and there was a 6-furlong race. And they're off. And they came around, and they crossed the finish line, 1, 2, 3, and the objection sign went up. But I talked intelligently, and I was able to...
Yeah, ad lib and...
Yeah, and then I signed the program off, and the following Monday, Abe called me down. He said, hey, you got it. He said, I want you to know. He said, you're now NBC's turf commentator.
That's great.
Huh?
Did you travel much?
Oh. The only race I didn't do over the years was the Kentucky Derby. That's because it was owned by CBS. Or the Belmont Stakes, and you name the races. And just a great life.
Was there any particular race that was most exciting to you?
Oh,
Or were there so many of them?
yeah, geez, I'd be hard-pressed. Because they were, and some were very sad, like when...
Accidents?
Yeah, I mean, you see jockeys go down and all that.
Yeah. Some fatalities also?
One. And a great horse went down. I forget his name just now. So all told, now I moved from NBC over to WPIX. They just went on the air.
I was owned by the news?
Yeah. And I went over there, but I had the credentials, so you could see there. And I was hired to do news, sports, and special events. We're the nation's #1 sports station.
How did you come about getting these St. Patrick's Day parades?
Well, now here comes the story. It's always we were the nation's #1 sports station, and we were to cover Yankee and Giant baseball. And we had all the equipment in storage. And the program department and the engineering department got together, and they said, look, it's coming up soon. we should really see and hear how they work outdoors. So they said, let's do an hour of the St. Patrick's Day parade.
This is in 1950, 49?
50, 51, yeah. So, yeah, who? And one guy says, well, he's McCarthy, he looks Irish.
They wanted an Irish-looking face for the Irish parade.
You know, so I took myself up to the American Irish Historical Society and had these cards I put together enough for what I thought was going to be an hour of the St. Patrick's Day parade. And I did the show. And about 3/4 of the way through, got a notice that the response has been tremendous. Can you hold it for another half hour? Now I'm out of material. And I start to remember what I learned growing up, the history of Ireland, the poetry of Ireland, and even the saucy stories I tell. And was on for 4.5, 5 hours, ad-libbing.
So that was the beginning of your very lucrative career.
You bet. And, the next year, now, on the strength of this, a news guy came out and said, a star was born again. And now I'm going to do it again, but I'm doing it the next year. And I go up to the American Irish Historical Society, and I had these file cards, getting the material that I thought would be pertinent to the coverage of the parade. And got after him, wait, I'll open it. It says, there's a prayer that's breathed around in dear old Erin's land, and it's murmured on the threshold stone with a smile, and the clasp of hand, and oft perchance it's murmured low, with a sigh and a falling tear. Sweetest blessing man can bestow is a prayer. God bless all here, and happy St. Patrick's Day to you and your loved ones wherever you may be. And now we're on the air. It was a great opening, and it was a rather brisk day. And I have the file cards in front of me. And I was talking, and I was distracted for a moment, and I took my hand, and a gust of wind, shoo, and the whole show went up Fifth Avenue.
So you had to ad-lib it.
Here we go again.
Yeah.
But that was just part of it. You know, you do the thing, and it was a joy. You know, I just loved every part of that.
Yeah.
People seem to think that, hey, it's St. Patrick's Day, and oh yes, now we're talking, and this is true. Back then, the sales department didn't sell the parade. They sold Jack McCarthy during the parade. That's how they sold it.
Tell us a little about your negotiations after the first session of the St. Patrick's Day parade.
Well, I had been doing the parade for a couple of years, I think it was. And I think I was making, well, I won't say, but a very minimum amount of money. And I had this great good friend, Frank Purcell, who was down at Wall Street. And I had this guy in the sales department, Roger Hudson. And we got a call to sign the contract. He called me, the president did. I said, no way. I said, talk to my agent. Big stuff. So he called Frank. He says, don't do anything, but I'd like to make a date to see you on Monday. So we went down on Monday and we walked in. But I had learned by this time that they had sold the parade. They had about $190,000.
In ads?
Yeah. And we went down and we talked, and the guy says, you'll have 20% of the net after the agency commissions. That sounds like money. So Frank said, would you mind leaving? I want to talk to my client. And I says, he says, we really got him now. He says, we want to go for more money. I said, more money how? He says, leave it to me. He walks out and says, you can come in now. He said, we'll sign the contract, but first of all, I want you to know we need $5,000 for expenses. The guy was back inside the cemetery. You couldn't get a $5 raise for 6 months. Boom, because they were thinking about the money involved. So they came back in with the $5,000, and that night I came home and put it under Betty's plate. And she said, "What's this?" I said, "That's expense money." She said, "What are we going to do?" What? Yeah, sure. So she said, well, what are we going to do with this? I said, simple. We're going to call Tara. So we called Tara down.
That's your daughter?
Yeah, she was attending George Washington, Phi Beta Kappa.
How many children do you have, Jack?
3.
3?
And I said, "Tara, I want you to go out and buy yourself a new Toyota." She said, "How come?" I said, "Don't ask any questions. I'll send you the check." So that's where the $5,000 went.
What a thrill that must have been.
It was, you know, and it went on from there. It was, you know, meeting the President of the United States, talking with George Bush. Man, you know, I could go on and on. The Cardinal O'Connor, who was, to this day, a dear friend of mine, and his concern when I wasn't feeling well. And I'll tell you, Phil, it was just... And I won't be doing it yet except for, well, my neighbor, Jimmy Lynch, said to me, he said, "You know, Jack," he said, "you had it in the best of times, this parade. And with the laughter was there, the pride, the joy, the stories, the poetry, and everything else. But it's changed now."
There's a little article here in the paper. Let me just repeat it for our audience. Emerald birthday wishes to noted TV personality Jack McCarthy on the occasion of his 80th birthday. Now, this was written here in August. And McCarthy was the 1983 Grand Council of the United Emerald Society's Irishman of the Year. Mr. Ireland, USA was the TV host of New York City St. Patrick's Day Parade for 43 years. Telling the story of Irish contribution to the American way of life, McCarthy has been honored by the New York City Police Department Emerald Society, the Emerald Society of the Telephone Communications Workers, and the New York Housing Authority Police Emerald Society. It goes on and on. So that was quite a tribute to you this year.
Yeah, it was. It was. And with the stories, I mean, they're not rare stories. And President Kennedy's assassination, I covered that. His brother's assassination, I covered that. The arrival of the Pope, I covered that. And whenever there was anything of any consequence, it seemed like they called Jack McCarthy because I could talk without having to refer to a script.
Were you at the World's Fair when the Pope visited?
That was 1939.
65.
65, let's see, 65. Yes, that's when they had the Pietà out at the World's Fair. Is that correct? Yes, I was there.
Yeah.
I met him, and when he arrived here, I covered him all that day.
Yeah. That was quite an event. I was there at the time.
Yeah, you know, there was, well, I'm not going to... It was a wonderful, wonderful time.
I was just looking through your resume here. It goes on for pages and pages and pages. What surprised me is that, did you ever get into announcing baseball games? I know that was your first love.
No. No.
And Lou Gehrig was your hero.
Oh, yes. And, but I covered the other sports, the boxing and the track and field. Looking back over it, I can feel secure with the knowledge, in the knowledge that I covered the great ones of the time.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Now, you've been announcing St. Patrick's Day Parade now for 43 years. Has the parade changed much in those years?
Well, just most recently with the... I don't want to talk about that too much because it's painful the way the ill goes, you know, going into St. Patrick's Cathedral and crushing the host under their feet. And the mayor marching with them. And,
Yeah. How about the numbers at the parade? Have they been increasing through the years? The size of the parade?
No, but the ratings, because of what has been going on Fifth Avenue, and nobody will buy the parade. Nobody will buy the parade.
Yeah. Now, where did you announce the parade from?
From 64th Street, opposite the official reviewing stand. Oh, I gotta say, wonderful guy was the producer and director of the parade. His name is Don Carney. And he said, you know, and it was like we're at the time we're having now, only it was local. He said, look, there's a lot of political stuff flying around. He said, so I don't want you to use any political jokes on the parade. Is that okay? I said, sure. So now we're on the air.
And you couldn't resist.
So there came a point, and he's panning the stand, and I said, Tom Connie said, I'm not to tell any political jokes during the parade. I said, but if you look into that stand, you're going to see a few. Well, but who's going to say you're picking? I didn't mention anybody, but they were all there because the official reviewing stand, because there was a camera, and if necessary, or if they was lucky, they'd get an interview.
And it was up to the public to decide which were the political jokes.
Sure.
Well, you certainly had a very interesting life, and certainly an enjoyable one, and from humble beginnings, coming up from the east side.
Yeah, because looking back, you know, I'm 80 years of age now, and I have to tell you one thing. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing.
Well, that's quite a statement.
Yeah.
You really had a satisfying life then.
I would think so.
And for the next 80 years,
Well,
equally as satisfying.
Well, we went to, when I met you Sunday, we were visiting with Mike Pinto on his 65th wedding anniversary.
Which is a record in itself.
Yeah, and that was a very moving occasion. And he to me is a remarkable personality.
You've been friends for a good number of years.
Oh, yes.
And you manage to come to each of the Washington Street outings every year?
I do. Sure, well, that's part of it. Oh, I'm not going. Well, here, he made as I said at his dinner the other day. In today's world, 20% of the people are leaders. 80% are followers. This man has been a leader. Now, you know of him, I know of him, and this is not his program, or he'd like to have me keep on talking like this. Mike, you had your inning, and now we'll just take it back to Boston.
Well, I want to thank you, Jack, for coming down and talking to us. Jack McCarthy, noted TV and radio personality who for many years has been associated with the St. Patrick's Day Parade, but he's had also a very interesting life, announcing boxing events and racing. And now in his retirement, he's enjoying life and visiting friends and living in our community, and we're happy to have you.
Delighted to be here, and I intend to stay.
Thanks very much, Jack.
God bless.
Thank you.
Also, one thing, just have to remember, sign off the parade and say, God, keep the heart here clean, and may you be in heaven a half hour before the devil knows your day.
And how about the other one, where the wind may be always at your back?
Well, I didn't use that too often.
Thanks very much, Jack.
Right.